Hey everyone, and welcome to a very big news drop from the Web3 Summit from Gavin Wood. He talked about a lot of topics. He talked about JAM, he talked about individuality, he talked about potentially replacing proof of stake in the future. There is also a story about Kusama season coming, Kusama CK season, and then a lot of details like Web3 outposts, oracles, and even a discussion about a new ecosystem native stablecoin that Gavin discussed. So because there was so much going on at the Web3 Summit, I thought I'm just going to do a live reaction video here for you guys. So we're going to view a little bit of the material. I'm going to comment it. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to drop them at the side. And then I will try to get into as much as possible, right? Okay, the topics that I want to discover today with you, I will roughly cluster them into JAM, individuality, and Kusama. And we will start by going into the conversation of the day, which is Gavin Wood at the Web3 Summit. So he presented for, I don't know, like 40 minutes or so. And then there was some follow-up presentations. And he talked about Polkadot, the road ahead. And very often when you hear Gavin Wood talk, he talks about one topic specifically and goes very deep. This presentation was different. He talked about all kinds of topics, a full range of topics that he is currently having his attention on. And so there were several parts to the conversation. I will try to bind it together for you, and I will also keep my eyes on the chat. Okay, hi, Aaron. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let's go. So at the beginning, he was giving a little bit of an overview about JAM, where are we right now, and how you can protect it. And then he talks also about some very interesting ideas. And there is an interesting overlap where his main project right now is Polkadot JAM, this new engine for Polkadot, this new supercomputer. And at the other side, he is working on proof of personhood and this individuality system. But what you can see throughout this conversation here is that he's actually merging these conversations or having them very closely related. So what we're actually looking at when we think about Polkadot JAM and individuality is that we are converging towards a world computer that knows people and not only coins, and you can execute everyday software in it. And this is a really interesting development. So we will go into this now. So in the beginning, he gave a little bit of an update about where JAM protocol is right now. And his focus is increasingly turning towards the actual specification of the JAM protocol. So lots of news about how everything is coming along and that he's basically nearing feature completion. There is more optimizations coming. And so this is the 0.7 gray paper series. And we are approaching 1.0, and then that would be full performance. So now the interesting thing in the conversation here is that, okay, we all have learned and heard that JAM is a world computer and it builds transactionless programs, so programs that can run really long. And then we start hearing about the services and service-oriented architecture. But the real thing that is coming out here of this conversation is that there is in reality kind of a virtual operating system emerging on top of JAM. So because JAM is fast, because it has very good I/O, because it has very good processing throughput, because it has this service-oriented architecture with I/O and communication between the services, what you can build on top now is an operating system. So this is why there was a very heavy focus in recent months on showing that Quake on JAM is working and Doom on JAM is working, because these are basically early high-performant programs that need a lot of data input-output, that swap data pages, that need access to a file system, and so on. And so what they had to build for JAM was a file system, was a graphics driver, and so on. And so what we can see coming out here as the flag of Core VM is actually the new foundations of an operating system. So a lot of the tech demos that Gavin is showing is not I'm deploying a smart contract and then I trigger the smart contract. it is a little bit like that, but you see a lot of user interfaces that show how the whole machine is working. And so also on the user interfaces, we are approaching more a world where we can directly interact with the chain, more similar to how we do it with traditional computers. And I think this whole trend will only accelerate, because what I learned from my conversation with the JAM implementers is that Gavin is now asking JAM implementers to think more creatively about what kinds of applications that they can now build on JAM now that there is the first few testnets. So this is an interesting conversation, this virtual operating system emerging out of JAM, which gives a whole new aspect, because you could build email servers, you could build web servers, you could build file repositories, and all kinds of things that are currently not so easily possible on the traditional blockchain systems, and that we see here emerging. So I truly believe this is a new generation of blockchain-based ecosystems that we're seeing here. He talked a little bit about JAM governance, and that does not mean on-chain governance, how we're used to. That's more the protocol governance. So what happens if Gavin becomes unavailable? If he one day he goes into his deserved pension or whatever. I guess Gavin will be keeping working on stuff like this forever. But what if he becomes unavailable? So he talked a little bit about this, how there will be an editorial board that will be working on this in the future. But let's say it's administrative. Yeah. Okay. Now, he was leaning now into the discussion of CK JAM. So we talked a bit about how is JAM performing, and now CK JAM. And CK, zero knowledge proofs, is the direction Ethereum is going, and they're very heavy on the CK roadmap. And now Gavin touches on a topic because he says he gets approached a lot with people asking them, when are you going to use CK in JAM? And so he goes there with a very data-driven approach, and his message is, CK is not at the point right now where it makes economic sense. It might be there in the future, and then we will look at it. So he, first of all, let his team look into the data, and they come to this estimation that it costs about 4,000 times as much to create a CK proof versus a crypto economic proof, how we do it in Polkadot with proof of stake. And then he compares the protocols a little bit, looks into how the basic cost structure is set up. But what eventually comes out of it is that in the end, you need to put up stake, and that costs you money. But the proof costs of CK are very high. And so Gavin is concluding that there needs to be at least a 10 to 100 times improvement in the order, like 10 to 100x order of magnitude improvement just to get the costs in order, so that it even starts to make sense building on CK. So right now, Ethereum is very heavily invested into CK, and you don't even know if eventually it will make economic sense that it does so. So there's a little bit of time to still wait, observe everything. And then, of course, there's already conversations going on how you would integrate CK if you had it. The interesting conversation that Gavin triggered is that you can have some kind of baseline security that you can have with crypto economic proofs. And then if you need premium security where you have guarantees of the proofs, you can go into a CK-based solution and look into that. So it is a little bit how we see it in Google Cloud or Amazon Web Services, where you can book premium services for paying extra, right? And so it's a little bit similar with CK JAM. So yeah, looking forward, once the prices go cheaper, it might make sense. Okay, good. Okay, now this was the first bang of the presentation. With asking the question, can you find a way to get rid of the high staking costs in Polkadot? Can you replace a proof of stake system where you pay out a lot of stakers a lot of money? And he starts with this number where he says $500 million are currently spent by Polkadot every year on security. In Ethereum, it goes into the billions. In Bitcoin, it goes into the billions. And so this is a cost component where you have to ask, is it possible to cut on that cost and lower the cost for the network to keep operating while you maintain the same level of security? And so everything that is coming here is presented as a thought experiment. He labels this clearly with thoughts, but it's a very interesting thought experiment. And so I started entertaining it in the recent days and looked a little bit into it. So Gavin starts with this assumption that there is a $500 million security cost in terms of what is being paid out as proof of stake to stakers. And he puts up this question and says, can we really assume that this money, this dot, stays in the economy, or if the stakers are selling? So, and he says there is no reason to believe that this much of this stays in the economy. So the question is, how can you contain more of the value? So he thinks about structural changes in the future. And so the series of ideas that you see here is a set of ideas of what would you need to change in a proof of stake system to step by step, with small iterations, replace it with a system that costs you less money. And in the end, I think there is alluding to that proof of personhood could be one of the major components that allows you. So let's look a little bit into the recipe. So the idea is, the first point, this was a little bit confusing to people, remove nominator slashing. So remove nominator slashing means that suddenly there wouldn't be no more risk. So I think typically you would assume if there is no risk, there is no reward. So this could be a little bit a hint that over time you want to phase out the nominators, how they exist right now. Then there is the point, high bars to validate. So a KYC or an interview, interesting. It could work because there is a fairly limited set of validators that you have. So it might be an interesting point for conversation. And then anonymous self-stake. So what Gavin means by that is that the validators right now, when they stake, they are exposed. You can see how much they're staking. So the idea here is, can you provide a level of anonymization so that you don't know how much stakers are providing? Fixed fiat rewards for validators. So here the assumption is that you know exactly, or you can model very exactly what it costs to nominate to the network. So if you can put that to a number, you can pay that out as a fixed amount to validators. And then a fixed fiat reward for stakers. So for example, 3% of $1 million at stake. So the change here is that the reward would not go out in DOT, but in fiat. And I'm not sure if it means fiat or stable coins, but let's say at least stable coins. So this was one idea. Now he's switching a little, and so what Gavin says that he assumes that you can go down from $500 million cost per year to about $90 million cost per year with these methods. Okay, here he is adding an interesting twisted conversation that we already had before. Could Polkadot cap the max issuance, so the capped supply, to pi billion dots, so 3.14 billion dot? And what that would require, and we see this conversation happening more and more, what that would require is that you would need to really deeply think about what happens inside the system. So how much issuance is being created, how much is being distributed to validators, how much is being distributed to treasury, or to any other kind of mechanism. How does redistribution happen in the system? Do you have a halving, or do you have small step changes? So I think this is a little bit of a discussion starter, and you see that, for example, on the Kusama, there's more discussion going on this. And yeah, the idea is with having pi billion, it's fairly far into the future, so there is enough room for governance to maneuver, and it creates an incentive into the economic policy to start thinking more deeply about how do you want to structure the economy. So I think a lot of the conversation that will go on in the future now is, what kind of demand drivers do we have in Polkadot? Where are there actual projects that are relevant enough that you would send DOT there because there is something interesting happening? And he finally makes this point of issuance is not interest. So what that means is that only because tokens are issued does not mean that they are paid out. Yeah. So there can be, for example, in theory, you could issue all tokens at once and then just not distribute them. Or yeah, so the amount that goes to stakers is different from the amount that is being created. We know that because only 85% of the issuance is going to stakers. Good. Yeah, so then he's starting this discussion about a native stablecoin, and he goes into that. A little bit further down the road, and then he goes into proof of personhood. So he introduced all these ideas of how can you step by step transition to a cheaper way to pay for security while you get the same amount of security. And then what he's saying here is a strong anti-Sybil scheme. So what that means is, can you come up with a scheme where you can tie the votes, in this case, of voting for a validator to an anti-Sybil scheme like proof of personhood, so where you can be sure that you have individuals that are voting. And so the idea is, if you could, instead of letting capital vote, if you instead could let people vote, maybe this would reduce the cost. So switch staking for voting. Interesting. And so what that means is that instead of adding stake, you could have people voting that are identified via proof of personhood. You can increase the vote of the voters who back good validators, so who made correct votes in the past where they were not slashed. And then I've been wondering if I did not pay attention here, but he says easy matchmaking with this emoji. So I wonder what he said here. So I definitely have to rewatch this. And then validation requires proof of personhood stake. So there would still be stake involved, just not from stakers, but I guess from the validators, and votes. And then you want to ban bad validators and their voters, which is interesting because it means that over time, if you make a bad decision, you get kicked out of the system. So yeah, interesting what will happen if people are disputing this. Good. Yeah, and then he drops this last idea where he says, actually, JAM could dynamically adjust how many cores are active. And so if there would be not enough demand for cores, the system could just have less cores active, and there could be some kind of dynamic adjustment. And so this way you could avoid validator costs because you just phase them out of the system and they do not run idle. So this was a lot of ideas around economics. I think that will start a lot of discussions, and he labeled all of these thoughts. So not all of these ideas will make it. I think it's a good conversation starters to think about, more dynamically think about, how can we actually construct a system where that is becoming so smart and so sophisticated that you can think about different ways on how you structure everything. And maybe proof of personhood can play a role here. We have to see what comes out when it goes live. And interestingly, JAM marks this as a version 1.1, right? So he thinks about additional features for the future. And something he did not discuss here, but in a different place, is post-quantum resistant algorithms. So this would require changing a few algorithms. And then the other thing is JAM grid, where you could actually connect different JAM instances if you run multiple of those. Okay, so we are entering this conversation of proof of personhood. And so Gavin touches on more ideas of what you could do with proof of personhood. Yeah, we see one more comment from Florentino. Thank you. So about the matching validators with nominators is what I recall he said about matching. Yeah. So I don't know exactly what he went into, but it's about matching nominators with validators. All right. Thank you, Florentino. Okay. So we're going into ideas of proof of personhood, and this exercising rights in this brave new world. Okay, I will go into the comment soon, Megan. Okay, so exercising rights in this brave new world. This was an interesting thing. It was very quick. It was like he presented this, I think, like 2 minutes, but this is very interesting. So I think the point he wants to get here, and I will directly go to the point. The thing he wants to get here is there is an increasing grasp on people to KYC themselves, and then crypto is the scary thing where you don't know what's going on. And so what states and nation states are trying to do, are trying to do is that they say everything must be doxed, or there must be a whitelist, or you must make your account known to the authorities. And this basically means if your account is known to the authorities, they know exactly what you're doing with your money, which is fine above certain values, because there is legal requirements that if you do transact with more than a certain amount of money per day, you have to declare it to the authorities. But that is not true for below a certain amount. Now, when your account is known, there is no, so you will not be able to make the difference. Now, what Gavin is saying here is that you can actually, when you have proof of personhood, you can actually build privacy-aware applications, privacy-preserving applications that follow certain rules. So you could have a privacy-preserving application that says you are only allowed to do $1,000 transactions per day in secret, and if it is more, it does not work in secret. It maybe only works in public. Or $10,000 per transaction, or $1,000 per transaction, or $10,000 per person per day. So what he is saying is that something like proof of personhood can be compatible with existing regulation for individuals, which means it's a competing force that now competes against an overarching grasp of states to look into every aspect of your personal life. It says you can have that privacy protected, and it is still compliant. So there is no argument to say you should not have proof of personhood or you should not have CK, because you can actually build applications that comply with the local law. So this is a little bit of a warm-up, and then he goes full on into this individuality discussion. So what you can see here is a logo, and this looks like it is an Earth, half of a globe, and then the upper half it looks a little bit like a human that is doing a hug gesture. So I think it is this, with the tagline "Resisting Sybil in the Web3 world." And he rehashes very quickly what does individuality actually mean. He talks about proof of personhood and how it allows you to have mechanisms for individuality, for proof of personhood, that follow our Web3 ideals. You don't need to get doxxed against a certain entity. There is no key master that has access to everything, and you use CK to actually have privacy. So this is a question that we commonly have. So proof of personhood is a topic that is being widely discussed in the industry. It's being talked about by Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, and it's being talked by many others. Sam Altman is doing his take with the Orb and WorldCoin. But how is it actually done in Gavin Wood's idea of proof of personhood? So the idea is that you have these decentralized individuality mechanisms. So you have different mechanisms that allow you to prove that you are one individual, and that hard to explain, that you're an individual. There's a mechanism that allows you to prove that you're an individual. And individual means there is only one, there is not two, there is not zero. There's exactly one time this individual. And so he does this by introducing different mechanisms. And I think the way we can best see it is if we look at this collection of screenshots that he shared, where we can see a few of these individuality mechanisms. So the first one, this is the most contentious one, is one that is often discussed, which is the tattoos. And so what you can see here is that there's actually a place on the hand where the tattoo can be placed. And the idea here is you can only place this tattoo once. Yeah. So I understand this will not be the flavor of everyone, and this is only one mechanism. So what this will allow is people that want to go through the first individuality mechanism, they can go through this mechanism. They can have a tattoo here. It's algorithmically generated, so you can generate. You can use different image generators, so you can pick a flavor. It might be a flower, it might be a pattern or whatever. So there will be different patterns. And you will be able to submit a 3-minute video, and then there is a proof that you are that someone had this tattoo being done, and they sort of have the private key for that, right? So, and suddenly from this individuality, you can now create different identities within the system. So you only have one individuality, but there is different groups or social media or other applications. And within each application, you will create an identity that is not connected to your individuality. So in each system, you can assume a different identity. You can behave differently, and you can basically act pseudonymously within that social system without having it being correlated to other kinds of groups that you're part of. So there's the tattoos, and then there is the second mechanism, which you see here alluded to in the top left. So, and then there is round 3 of 12. So I think the idea is that you will have maybe once a week, you can be part of this game where someone shows a gesture with the hand, and then you have to repeat this gesture. And if you complete this 12 times in a row, you are basically verified for the coming week. And these are the two mechanisms that we see right now. So this is what Gavin alluded to. And this is works as an oracle into the system where there is some kind of verification going on, where others checkmark, okay, this is legit. And so these are the two individuality mechanisms. And so Gavin says that the application will launch in Q4. So we can actually put this on our roadmap. And maybe let's do this right now. Where do we have proof of personhood? We don't have it yet. Individuality here. Citizenship Q4. It's actually confirmed now. I was speculating that we will see that we will actually see a paper at the Web3 Summit. This does not happen, so I moved this forward because I'm pretty sure there will be a paper. And yeah, we will have both individuality mechanisms coming sometime in Q3, maybe as one thing. And there is tattoos and there is videos. All right, good. Moving on. He mentioned a little bit Web3 oracles. So the idea is once you expose to a system that you have verified that someone showed their hands or showed their tattoo, it's basically an oracle. And he did not go too much into that. He says it is needed for DIM 1. And so, yeah, coming soon. And then the last topic that he talked about that was very interesting to see the reactions from the people. And the basic idea is of this Web3 outpost is that this is a side project that Gavin is having where he is renovating a bar and renovating like a mansion somewhere. And the idea is he gifts this to the community to be able to have events there, to be able to come together, to meet, and to have a shared hackerspace. So it's called Web3 Outposts, and I imagine there can be many different outposts of these. So it is part of this growing tendency that Web3 ecosystems have representation in the real world. And so I imagine there will be many outposts in the real world where people can come together. If they are part of proof of personhood, maybe they get some nice gimmicks, some nice access, I don't know, free food, free drinks, I don't know. We will see. And so he shared a little bit of the ideas of how this could look like, how people can come together, create together, and shared a little bit of the ideas of how these first few outposts will look like. And so starting off, there will be one in Lisbon, one in Berlin, and one in Malta. And more to come. Yeah, and then I'm not sure if he talked about this at the end or if I attached a tweet at the end. He talked about a stablecoin. So this is an ecosystem native stablecoin that has additional properties. I'm not sure why it relates to so we have a Polkadot ecosystem native stablecoin coming up with Holla. But what I hear from some conversations is that Gavin has some unique new ideas that he wants to inject here. So I would say we see what's coming up, and then we will go about it. All right. Okay. That was Gavin Wood's presentation, and then there was another big angle that was fairly interesting at the Web3 Summit, and that was the hackathon on the whole Kusama season coming up. So last year at the Web3 Summit, there was a hackathon, and I saw people hacking there. But I think there was a very interesting shift in energy this year, where it was a lot about Kusama. And I just want to guide you through this because this was a really interesting energy, and it felt like there is a Kusama season coming up. So I'm going to recap you a little bit on this. Kusama is the sister network of Polkadot. It has the same underlying technological base. in most cases, the updates are first deployed to Kusama before they go to Polkadot. So it's an innovation network. It's a network to try out things. And it's also where you can meet a smaller subset of the Polkadot community, and where you can meet the developers and the hackers and the people that like to be a little bit underground, right? And it was launched roughly at the same time with Polkadot. I think initially it had a little bit of a recruitment problem. Everything was new in Polkadot. Kusama was new, Polkadot was new, Parachains was new, everything was new. And to be able to hack around and to play around, you need either a lot of people trying out the technology, or you need to have people, and then you need to have people trickling over that are already having so much experience in the base ecosystem that they can spend some time on Kusama and playing around with everyone here, right? And I think the time was not yet right for Kusama in this sense that it was sustainable. So there was a little bit of a slowdown. But everything was revitalized in December when Sean Tabrizi came out with this forum post, and he said, make Kusama chaotic again. And so he shared a few ideas of how Kusama can get a new start with a focus on privacy, with a focus on its hacker culture, where things are decentralized, self-sovereign, where you can just play around with things, bring CK primitives to Kusama, and have just bring in a lot of ideas of these privacy-preserving technologies. So this was a start of a conversation, and then the Web3 Foundation came in, and they again confirmed this, that there will be 10 million DOT provided by the Web3 Foundation as capital for grants, for funding, for ideas, for experiments, everything that has to do with privacy-preserving technology and the use of CK. So there was just this news article coming out, and then to lay the base one more time, the spamming last year was done on Kusama. So it was showing the capability of how much Polkadot is able to do, but it did that on Kusama, because on Kusama, it was easily possible to rent 23 cores, so 23% of the capacity of the network, and then just run full-blown tests on them, see how much transactions per second you can get through. And this spamming actually showed that the network was able to sustain 143,000 transactions per second at 23% capacity. And what that means is that if you calculate it, you could get to 620,000 transactions per second. That was before we had a lot of network optimizations. So already, I think some developers have told me they already deployed network optimizations that should allow the throughput to roughly double. So in theory, we already have 1 million transactions per second. And then we will get NOMPed, which is another optimization for storage on the blockchain, which should also 10x this, right? So in theory, I mean, you always have to see how things play out in practice. But from just the improvements that we have right now, we should see a theoretical improvement of 20x, going to beyond 10 million transactions per second. Let's see what reality brings. Also, let's see what JAM brings. But then with JAM, you would get another 3x, 3.4x. So too much. Let's see what the reality brings. Okay, so this is the baseline of what we see in Kusama. And now we see this heightened activity where small experiments start taking place. So one big part of that is the RFP launcher, which allows you to make proposals on what new things should be tried out on Kusama. It's fairly new. And we already see that there is two interesting proposals. One, shielded Kusama hub transfers. So you can think technologies that allow you to mix tokens, like Tornado Cash was fairly known, but basically privacy-preserving applications that allow you to have transfers where the recipient and the sender are shielded. So there was a little bit of a specification here, and then there was already submissions, and I think there is a test version of this live on Paseo, if I'm correctly informed. And then the second RFP that we saw is Kusama app, which is sort of a gateway for newcomers to the ecosystem. And I think we actually saw this with the latest hackathon. So now let me get to the story of the Web3 Summit. This hackathon had a really good vibe and energy. It was, of course, organized by Webzero, and they have become a household name in organizing interesting events, interesting hackathons. And yeah, it was a 3-day hackathon with really good vibes. So they have this Blockspäte, which is sort of this bar, cafe, I don't know, chill out area, where you have drinks, where you have food every day. and then people were just hanging out, and these people were hacking 24/7. And so the interesting thing this year, there was $100,000 in prizes. This is not even true anymore. It was over $100,000 in prizes at the end. There was an additional commitment, and it was possible to build on all of those things. So there was Sheyun from Hyperbridge was there, the UX bounty was there, the marketing bounty was there, people from Inc., Kusama, Polkadot. So there was a lot of our senior people there and actually supporting the people that were hacking. And I had so many interesting conversations at the hackathon. And then there was just the Polkadot main track, $20,000 in prizes. There was the Kusama main track with $40,000 in prizes. And one of the subtracks was to use zero knowledge, to use cryptography. And so this was insane because you saw people that are just coming, bringing their CK primitives and building something in 2-3 days, which for me is new. They use Noah, the Noah framework, and this was just crazy. And then they built things like anonymous voting and OpenGov, and they built a prototype in 2 days. One task was do experiments with proof of personhood, and then there was art and social experiments, which was a very broad category. So you didn't even need to be super technical. And yeah, in total, $100,000 in prizes. And I think the milestone structure was also very interesting, because the milestone structure here was the hackathon counts as milestone 1, and then you have some additional ideas for milestone 2 and how you want to extend and how you want to follow up on what you present at the end of the hackathon. And so half of the prize money, if I understood correctly, is paid out if you deliver milestone 2. So it's a really nice incentive to, first of all, do something for the hackathon, but then you might also want to continue and actually finish this thing, right? And so the idea is to have a funnel and to get people in, and then once they're in the whole thing, they can familiarize themselves more with what's going on Polkadot, develop a social community, etc., and move on from there. Okay, and this whole thing was accompanied by Kusama CK Day. So there was a whole half day just dedicated to CK and what you can build with Kusama and CK. So there was briefings, CK versus T's. We talked, there was talks about Noir, Sync, which I like as a name. And so again, it had this flavor of, okay, everything is well-rounded, everything is focused on making Kusama and CK work together. And it was just really cool to meet all the hackers, what they had going on. There is this nice picture from the closing ceremony, and the room was fairly packed at the ceremony. There was still space, but it was actually very big. And yeah, so this is the first one that we saw. This actually from Crane. He built a whale monitor. He vibe coded this. And this is a tool that allows you to watch transfers going on from the bigger accounts on Polkadot and mapping it all out. And it was just cool to watch Crane build this. We have what we have here is submitting CK anonymous reporting on what is going on in governance. So very interesting in terms of maybe considering future commenting, auditing whistleblower platforms, and get some accountability, like improve accountability in OpenGov. We had what is this? Yeah. This is basically, I think, cross-chain transfers or something like that. Sorry. And then yeah, this one, of course. So this was Kusama Hub. This was intended, and maybe this is alluding to the Kusama app RFP here. I'm not sure, but this is Kusama Hub. So the idea here is that you can get an overview about what are the apps that are actually provided in Kusama right now, and you see it all on one website, which makes the discoverability easy and allows people to like go to one place and see everything that's going on. Memos self using CK proofs generated from your passkey. Yeah. Yeah, lots of interesting thing. Polkadot, this one was what I was looking for. So this allows you to provide CK proofs for how you voted. And yeah, that's it. There was a lot more going on, but I think it shows that there is an actual CK season, Kusama season going on. And I think we're going to end it. I saw one last question, so I will briefly go into that because I think this is a very relevant topic. Long-term responsibility, Megan says, long-term responsibility means Polkadot needs a business plan. So what's going to generate revenue to offset the ongoing costs? Core time sales certainly aren't going to do it the way it is right now. I think this is a very relevant conversation, so I want to go into that a little bit. And I just want to share my latest thoughts, because there was also a lot of conversations on that at the Web3 Summit. And so the core question is, how can you make the economy work? And this has a few sides to it. So there is a tokenomics discussion. And tokenomics can be many different things. And then there is the actual economy discussion. So when we talk about tokenomics, what we actually mean is that there is a certain, for example, supply. So what are the rules for the supply? How does inflation work? How does deflation work? What are the basic mechanics to create tokens, to destroy tokens, and to redistribute tokens? Redistribution can just mean I send you tokens. That's a redistribution. But there is also the redistribution of value. For example, if there's staking rewards going towards someone, then their relative stake increases compared to everyone else's. And so what we talk about here mostly when we talk about tokenomics is the mechanics of the system. So the mechanics of tokens are created, tokens are burned. So when we now talk about the economic drivers, one thing we can talk about is, where is there demand for DOT? And so the most typical answers are for block space. And what block space means is, for example, transaction fees, like we will see them on the hub, Polkadot hub. And then, of course, core time. So, and core time, buying core time is dependent on how much demand there is, how much different chains and applications there is. We will see that the price discovery will get more realistic once elastic scaling launches, but it does not necessarily mean that there will be a hugely increased demand. We know about quite a few projects that are actually building and planning to use more core time, but there will not be a sudden burst in core time demand. I think this is a metric that will grow over time, similar to how it grew on Ethereum, how it grew on Bitcoin. And the value proposition here is, because block space is very flexible in Polkadot, there will be demand for that. But I think the real conversation here is, what are the actual demand drivers for Polkadot, for DOT? And that means going into an economic discussion. Because if you compare it to a real world economy, the demand drivers are where there is applications, where there is a real demand to use it. So, for example, if you go to Google Cloud, what you will see is that you can rent servers, you can rent storage, and I guess a lot of demand on Google Cloud will just go to that basic services. Maybe there is a high demand in AI right now, and so there is a high demand to send money to AI-related services. And so I think, similarly to how you see this playing out in a Google Cloud economy, we have to think about what are the demand drivers that are relevant in Polkadot. And to some demand, the technology is neutral, so everyone can build on it. And we see that, for example, DeFi is a very popular product. But the great thing about Web3 is that there is actually a lot of different use cases. So Origin Trail is just generating a lot of knowledge assets all the time. Unique onboarded a lot of the players. Mythical is onboarding the players. Peak is onboarding devices and users. And so I think we will have to model more clearly what is has the highest level to create demand for DOT, so that there is economic activity going on. So there is some serious thought going into this discussion, and sometimes I call this the verticals, where you have a vertical in DeFi, you have a vertical in gaming and entertainment, in deep in real world assets. So there's more on the DeFi side. Also, physical, like computation and oracles, and deep in there is also a lot of overlap. And there is these different verticals and how you can look at that. And I think we will see a lot more discussion on that. And that means, on the tokenomic side, some serious discussions that are going on is introducing a capped supply, like Gavin suggested, and like we have a lot of discussion, and then just reducing the distribution of value to stakers as much as possible, so that you can still have a secure system, but you're not overpaying for security. And then seeing about how much money should actually get distributed to OpenGov, and what is the actual cost that should be spent on OpenGov, right? So going more towards a budgeting approach, going more towards a structured approach of what do you actually intend on spending money on, and not, oh, there is money, what do we spend it on? Which is not such a reasonable approach. So there is a lot of discussion going on OpenGov, and I think we will see some very interesting proposals coming out. There is discussion going on tokenomics, and then the hardest discussion of all, but the most relevant, is the economic discussion and how we can make a true Web3 economy work that is not just based on DeFi, but that is based on products that are actually helpful for humans. All right, that's a little bit of the discussion on that. I hope you enjoyed it. And I just see that there is one more question coming in, so let's see if we'll get it on time here. And yeah, if you have any more questions right now is a good point in time to ask it, because then I can take it in. Okay, can't copy, is too long. I will quickly try to find it on Twitter. And yeah, maybe let's make this a short Q&A. Yeah, okay, I see the question from Green Hatter. Thank you, Cheaper. So, okay, this is the question. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you. So, question, this is from Reddit. Won't proof of personhood make validators more vulnerable to censorship and control from governments? Anonymity makes it hard for governments to shut down validators, but if their identity is revealed, then it would be easy for them to control and censor them, and with that, control Polkadot. This is an excellent question because it allows us to highlight the actual benefit of proof of personhood. So there is different proof of personhood systems, and some of them require that you give your identity to someone, that you show your identity card to someone, or make some other kind of confessional. The idea of proof of personhood, how Gavin Wood is building it, is that there is no confessional. So that means that if you prove your individuality on chain, and then you join the validator ring community, you will have an identity there. But this identity is not linkable to your individuality, and so therefore it is not linkable to you as a person. So there's two layers of separation actually there that separate you from being doxed on how you're voting. Governments, I think actually governments might have an easier time knowing if a lot of money is being moved to a centralized exchange from a company that is maybe participating in validation services. This is much easier to track than if you would somehow secretly prove your identity on chain and then start voting for oh, I didn't show the question. Start voting for yeah. So I think with the proof of personhood that Gavin Wood is actually building, you have a level of protection from governance in terms of how you're voting, because it's not directly relatable to your identity. What might be the case in some cases, that maybe you don't want to have the tattoo, maybe you want to have some of the other individuality mechanisms that are not permanent to your body. So maybe you want to participate in these other games that are basically introduced for this. All right. I think that was a part of our conversation for today. Thank you everyone for dropping by. Feel free to let me know if there's any additional question. You can jump onto Twitter. So this is @EdisonBob. This is also where you find me on Telegram. It's also where I find me on YouTube. And yeah, thank you for